Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the channel. Now, as we fans do, we see certain players and immediately what we want to do is compare them to other players, right? We want to compare them to other players. So recently I've seen the rounds being made around for Jacurri. I think that's the latest, greatest pronunciation of his name I've heard. Jacurri Brown, that I saw one particular poster say that, maybe he could be our Justin Fields, which I understood what he was saying, but I disagree with him. But I understood what he was trying to say, because to me, I feel like for two things, right? I feel like if we're going to start a comp, I think that what we need to do is we need to think about said player when they first arrived in college, right? And then I think that becomes a better gauge versus a guy who came in a little bit more polished, a little bit more better, and hoping that a player who came in a little bit behind them can actually reach that because they already have a head start. So one of the things that we know is that Justin Fields was a great high school quarterback. Many people felt that Justin Fields outperformed Trevor Lawrence at the Elite 11. They were running 1-2 for the longest period of time, which I think they ended that way. And obviously Trevor Lawrence ended up edging them out because it was one of those situations where Trevor Lawrence was looked at to be the greatest high school prospect, quarterback and all this stuff since, some people, even at his freshman year when they upset Alabama in the national championship game. And some people were saying, man, Trevor Lawrence needs to come to the NFL right now, right? So while Justin Fields was sitting behind Jake Fromm at the University of Georgia, right? But I have four guys that I feel like that are comparable comps to, I think, Jacurri Brown. And I think from the standpoint of where those particular guys started at can be comparable to him. Now, this is the interesting thing about this, right? Is when you do these particular type of things, if you're dead set on them, I think what ends up happening, it becomes a hindrance from a fan perspective, because once you put lofty expectations on a player and they don't actually reach those expectations, you somewhat get upset about it, right? And you start saying, oh, well, he didn't make it, he wasn't this, he wasn't that, and all that stuff. And I think the only thing from a potential ceiling standpoint that we as fans can actually put out there for a player are tangibles, the things that we can see. But the reality is what separates the good, the great, and the solid, good, and great is this: the intangibles. Are you going to work harder? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? That's what separates those particular guys, right? And those are just certain things that we can't measure because we're not around these particular guys every waking moment, right? We usually just see them on game day. We may see them, if you follow those guys on social media and stuff like that. That's kind of what that is. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the top, what I feel like the absolute ceiling could be, and then I'm going to kind of go down to the bottom. I'm going to work my way down. So obviously, first one, Cam Newton. Both guys, Georgia kids. I think one of the things about Cam Newton was that when he came out, one of the knocks that scouts had on him was that when Cam missed, he missed high. He threw the ball high. And I kind of looked at that throw that he had, that Jacurri had to X. It was a high throw. X went up there and got it, nearly got decapitated for it, but he still held on to the football. And I think that could be a situation with Jacurri where some of his passes might end up selling high on him. Again, similar to Cam, kind of strong arm, an innate ability to run the football, which I was upset really during the game when I saw him have to go to the sideline for a breather, and then we bring Jay Garcia in, and the first thing we do is try to throw the football. And I'm thinking to myself, why didn't we just try to do that with Jacurri in the game, right? So I was kind of upset about that. But obviously, we all know the Cam Newton story, dismissed from Florida, goes down to Blinn Junior College. The whole situation that was going on with Auburn and the Mississippi State thing, the $200,000, did he take it, did he not take it, and all that extra stuff like that. And just the mental fortitude that Cam had to have at that particular point in time, because people are calling you Scam Newton. They're calling you Scam Newton. And I feel like that's something that has to be commended. Now, I don't know from a intangible standpoint if Jacurri has that, if he's built like that to where maybe some things are not going his way, can he actually rise to the occasion and surpass it? I still think one of my favorite games in recent memory was the Auburn versus Kentucky game, because Randall Cobb was still at Kentucky. Randall Cobb and Ted Ginn are my two all-time favorite non-Miami football players. Obviously, you know, I like Ted Ginn. I like Terrell Pryor too. So what? It is what it is, right? But the thing of it is that Cam went in each and every game and carried a team that many people probably didn't think was going to make it to the national championship game. Obviously, Bama was in their, that was during their particular run and stuff like that. So obviously no one thought that, man, you know, this Auburn's looking good. But I mean, Cam is looking good, and he's pulling the team with him, right? But that's the absolute highest potential I think he could reach. Next on the list is Colin Klein. Now, the reason I brought this, the reason I said this, and I want to try to say this the right way, but oftentimes when we see a black quarterback that has athleticism, we always try to find a black quarterback that we feel like fits that same criteria. But I feel like, well, no, sometimes there are white quarterbacks that can fit that mold as well. And I think Colin Klein is one who fits that mold. We as Miami Hurricane fans know Colin Klein all too well because we played them in 2011 as well as in 2012. Now, he wasn't a guy who was a prolific thrower of the football. Actually, he had more rushing touchdowns his last 2 seasons than he did passing touchdowns. As a matter of fact, I want to say his senior year, well, both collectively, right? He had more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns. Now, like I said, I don't want it to diminish Jacurri by being a running quarterback, but again, we know that it is an effective thing to have. It hurts the development, obviously, if we're projecting to the next level. But again, I'm not talking about the next level. I'm just speaking about what a guy can be at the collegiate level. Colin Klein, similar to Cam Newton, was able to potentially put the team on his back, and the team went as he went. And so I think, again, maybe Jacurri may have some of those type of intangible leadership characteristics and traits. He can have some of those intangible traits to where he can potentially maybe put a team on his back and, you know, run for a few touchdowns and then be sneaky good through the air. So that's second. Third, another quarterback we as Miami Hurricane fans are familiar with, Jeff Driscoll. Now, obviously, we played the Florida Gators in 2013, a game that many people felt that we weren't going to win. And not only did we win, we pretty much dominated. We forced 6 turnovers. And that was a good day. That was a good day to be a Miami Hurricane fan because that Florida team returned a lot of talent from a team that had went 12-2 the previous year. Obviously, that team that we beat ended up, falling down. But at that time, that was a very good win. And Jeff Driscoll struggled. He was brought in to run a system that Urban Meyer wanted him to run, but obviously Urban Meyer mysteriously got sick. Yeah, he got sick, all right. But Will Muschamp comes in and just cannot manage Jeff Driscoll whatsoever. And Jeff Driscoll ends up leaving and going to Louisiana Tech, where he was able to put together a pretty solid last year and ended up getting drafted, right? So I think that, again, the size, the ability to run, again, all 3 of these guys that I've just named, not the greatest throwers of the football. Now, Jacurri can get better. He probably can get better at throwing the football, but the age-old saying is that you cannot improve accuracy. You either have it or you don't. Josh Allen would say that myth is a lie, or that statement is a lie, but how many Josh Allen situations can you point to where a guy was inaccurate and suddenly became accurate, right? So I think I'll go with the norm versus the outlier, right? And lastly, Jeremy Johnson. Now, obviously, if from a comp standpoint, like I said, they match up. Same size, same build, ability to run the ball. Again, not the most accurate thrower, but if, could probably can make some passes. Obviously, Jeremy Johnson was compared to Cam Newton as well. Didn't necessarily reach that. Ended up not being a starter for Auburn after a while. Now, like I said, he has some bright spots like what we're seeing with Jacurri right now. But like I said, I want to go from best case scenario to absolute worst case scenario, right? And I'm not trying to say that Jeremy Johnson wasn't a good football player, because obviously he was. He was heavily recruited. He was a guy who had all type of high school accolades. But one thing that can be said and has to be said is that sometimes some guys max out at the high school level. And once the ability and talents of everyone else around them is on the same plane as them, they, for whatever reason, whether it has to be intangibles, they cannot overcome that, and they end up just faltering by the wayside. So like I said, that's the absolute worst case scenario for Jacurri Brown. But like I said, I kind of want to put it like that, right? But gun to my head, maybe I can't say gun to my head. Feet to the fire, right? Feet to the fire, I think he could be somewhere between Colin Klein and Jeff Driscoll, and could possibly be a little bit more than Colin Klein, right? At the max. But to just put such expectations on his shoulders that he's going to give us a Cam Newton type of performance, I mean, that's a lot to ask, man. I mean, that's a lot to ask. I mean, that's probably the greatest single season in college history when you take into account that he hadn't been on campus. He just showed up, right? He hadn't been there for 2 years. He was just there for 1 year, put on, and he left, right? Whereas Colin Klein, you can look at the numbers. The numbers steadily got better all the way up to his junior and senior year. And again, like I said, Jeff Driscoll had, some rough 4 years, and then that last year he was able to kind of put it all together at Louisiana Tech. So like I said, feet to the fire, I would say somewhere in between Colin Klein and Jeff Driscoll, or slightly better than Colin Klein. Obviously, if he is the starting quarterback for the Miami Hurricanes, I do think that's going to yield victories. But I don't necessarily know how the dynamic the offense may be, but it will yield victories. So if y'all like the comps, if y'all think these comps are off-based or whatever it is, let me know in the comments, right? As always, like, share, subscribe, and it's always about the you. Peace.